Hi everyone, I hope everybody had a great week being creative. For me it was a pretty nice week. I started a really cool short film with a director I've never worked with before but always wanted to, and we finally had the opportunity, so we're kind of working on that right down in the studio. So today we're going to talk a little bit about anatomy of a cue, but first let's talk about last week. I hope everybody went back and looked at their PRO if they had one already and researched some of the benefits. There's help out there. And we as artists should go and get help and guidance if we need to, like we talked about insurance and just anything that we need help with regards to our business. There's people out there. If you are not a part of a PRO, I hope you went and started the IPI-CAE process, because it's really important. This is your lifeline to the music business for sure. I hope you also did the entrepreneurial quiz. And don't be discouraged by that. That's just something that I like to teach people or give to people so they can figure out, maybe there's strengths in certain areas and maybe there's weaknesses in others. And we all have those. That's okay. So sometimes maybe you need help. And I talked about, for example, shooting these lessons. My wife helps me. She's the person that's got the eye for detail on that and for graphics and things like that. I'm just not wired that way. And so we all wear all the hats a lot of times, but sometimes you need help. I think it's good to identify weaknesses or areas that you might need help on or you might want to work on. I mean, I know just compositionally there's stuff that I do really well and there's some stuff that I work on all the time. So hopefully that helped you a little bit and identified stuff that maybe you're really, really good at and maybe stuff that you really just need a little bit of help. So we'll do that. Keep looking at that. Keep looking at reflecting on your strengths and your weaknesses and working on stuff. That's important. We're always trying to build, right? We're trying to become better business people, better composers, better songwriters, better artists in general. So that's really important. Okay, so this week we're going to look at the anatomy of a cue. There'll be a video embedded in here where I'm kind of running through it. A cue that I wrote, that's one of my more successful cues. I wrote it in a couple of hours, maybe max. But there's a few things I want to talk about first, and there's going to be definitions attached to this lesson, things that you need to know. Some of you might already know this stuff, and that's great, but it's something we should reflect upon and understand. So, I'm not going to say so. So really, the first thing you have to remember about writing any music for a TV show is that your intros cannot be too long. Typically 2 to 4 bars max. That's kind of what you're looking at. And you'll see in the video how I kind of did it with that cue, but not long extended intros. That's just a no-no. Second thing you're going to realize is that there's a lot of layering involved. So layering means bringing in different kinds of elements to the track and then removing them, adding more, removing them, and it's just kind of like you're building a cake or you're building a house, from the ground up kind of thing. So layering is a really important aspect of this. The reason it is so that editors can cut the cue in certain areas and use certain portions of it and just be easier to kind of use in the show itself with regards to placement. The third thing we're going to talk about is hit points. Now hit points are kind of sharp or loud sounds. It could be a cymbal ring out, could be a guitar chord, that sort of thing. If you have multiple hit points within your cue, and this cue is 1 minute and 51 seconds I think, it gives editors a chance to actually stop the cue at that point. Some people call them posts, but really what they are is places where they can just cut it off, bring it back in later if they want. The cue that you're going to hear is going to have many different posts or hit points in it. And really what you're doing is just giving the editors that option to easily place sections of that track in their show. And that's really, really important. And we'll talk about that as we go further with stems and that sort of thing as well in the lessons. But the hit points, if you're writing certain types of music, are really important, as they just give them that opportunity to, maybe they want to use 8 seconds of your track, maybe they want to use 28 seconds of your track, maybe they want to use the full thing. But there's the points in there along the way they can use that to edit very easily. And the final thing we're going to talk about are the endings of tracks. So there's a cardinal rule in television music where you do not have fade outs. There's no fades whatsoever. So we call them button, sting, ring out, any term you want to use, endings. So it could be a simulcast that just kind of hits and then just goes away. It could be a guitar chord that hits and then goes away. It could be a stab of a synth and this goes away. But it's got that finite kind of sound to it. And you'll hear it in this cue, the Infidel cue. So we don't fade anything out. The reason why you don't do that is because it makes the music editor's job a lot easier with regards to maybe they're going to cut to a commercial, maybe it's going to cut to a new scene with a different feel, maybe they're just going to cut and all of a sudden they're going to go into a montage scene. But that ring out or button ending is really, really important. It gives them that opportunity to get out of there and get to something new. The other thing you're going to learn is that, I talk about this in the video, is that you can get way more cues than you think out of one track. So what you can do is you can combine or mute certain tracks. You can have tracks or cues that are written in two parts, which this one actually was. You're basically just trying to use the most you can out of all your music. So I think this cue's got 6 individual layers to it. By muting 1 or 2 or moving them around and that sort of thing, I got way more tracks. I think I got 13 or 15 out of it. And each one of these are registered with a PRO, my PRO, SOCAN, and can be used in all kinds of TV shows or games or films. But it's not, I didn't go in with the purpose of writing just one track. I went into the studio, and this is a mindset thing which we're going to talk about after you watch the video. You don't go into a studio with the mindset of I'm just going to write one song or one track. You go in there with the mindset of how much can I get out of this track or this cue or this song, and how many more different versions can I get so that I can register way more than just the original song. I hope that makes sense. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get moving forward because I'm going to show you the packaging of things and that sort of stuff. So have a look at the video. Check out my rationale, and I'm not the only one I didn't reinvent the wheel here. There's other people that do this as well. But the mindset was I went in there trying out some new software, I think at VST that I just got. But I came out of there with not just one cue, it's been on a bunch of TV shows. I came out with about 13 to 15, I think, altogether. So watch it, have a look at it, and provide any feedback, and we'll go from there. Okay, here we are. So this is the cue. It's called Infidel. This is version 2 that I've got. I actually made a couple of different versions of this, and I'll talk a little bit about that maybe later. But so this cue's been in a ton of different TV shows, films, games, and it's very simple. As you can see, there's only 6 little tracks here, and they're not. Some of them are just not too much involved. So we'll go through the cue, we'll listen to each layer independently, and we'll talk about the different things that I've already discussed. So initially we talked about introductions. So introductions shouldn't be too long in a TV cue. Remember, dialogue is king when it comes to TV and film, unless you're doing a chase scene or something that's, crazy busy, Spider-Man movie, stuff like that, where you action scenes. But if you listen to the examples even in lesson 1, you'll hear that the music is kind of there just to uplift the dialogue a little bit, just to give that little bit of extra push. So you don't take over as a composer or songwriter, band, whatever music you're writing. You're not trying to overwhelm the dialogue. The dialogue is king. So that's why a lot of TV music, and we're focused on TV music initially early on in these lessons, because that pays the most and it's aired most. It's really there just to kind of push an emotion, push a feeling, push the scene, what have you. So this cue is it can be used for CSI shows or crime shows. It's been in all kinds of different things, but we'll play through it and we'll have a listen to it. It's not very long, 2 minutes roughly, and it was written probably within a couple of hours, and it's probably the cue that I've got that's been aired the most. So let's first listen to the introduction. Remember I said keep them short, so you don't want to do a whole lot. So let's have a listen to the intro. Kind of a hit intro. So there we are, it sets the stage kind of thing. Then we get into the cue itself. So we got another layer added here and here. It's almost like a cake. Then we're going to pull these layers back. We're going to add another hit point. So we get a little pulsing drone kind of thing going. I've got drone, this would be drone. See, it kind of pulls away again. There's a hit point right there. Hit point right there. Now we're going to pull these layers back a little bit. We're going to do something completely different. So right there, that's almost a new cue in itself. And actually I did mix it that way on purpose. Very straightforward. Now this is kind of underscore, atmospheric underscore kind of thing. And at the end, we've got our button ending, or ring out ending, which you'll hear right here in a second. There you go, so that rings out. Again, ring out endings are important. You don't fade any music at all for TV. The ring out endings help for getting into commercial breaks, scene changes. It gives the editors lots of space to be able to inject either a new piece of music or cut to a commercial or just change scenes completely and go to a different emotion. So let's go through these tracks. So the initial track, the initial layer, let's call this layer 1. We'll just have a look at it. It's our hit point. That's our hit point again. Hit points are really important because they give editors a chance to cut. So if they only want to use part of your cue or certain parts of your cue, if you have a lot of hit points in there, they can use 10 seconds, 8 seconds, 25 seconds, what have you. So this is just a layer with a hit point at the beginning. That's an introduction. There's a hit point right there, so they could cut that cue right there. So that layer kind of goes away a little bit. Space is really important. Hit point right there, obviously. That track is done. That's it for that track. So we ISO'd that track. Excuse me. So let's look at layer 2. And obviously this would be layer 2 because it comes in next. It's very, very low in the mix. I'll show you the automation here maybe. This is the automation points here. We'll talk about stuff later on. But there's not a lot. If you actually look at the automation, you can see where I pull things in and out, right? Right here, bring them down. So this is more of an atmospheric kind of part of the track. So it just kind of pushes up everything else that's going on. Yet another layer, right? So listen, if you look at the automation here, it's going to go away for a bit. Then it's going to come back in. Very straightforward. Doesn't sound like much on its own, but it's actually, and we'll talk about this in a minute, These are called stems, by the way. These are individual stems. We'll talk more about stems as we get in the future here, but as you can see, a lot of these notes down here, if you can see, they're all just notes really close together. Okay, so that's layer 2. So obviously this would be layer 3. Let's have a listen to that. Let's see the automation for layer 3 right here. So it's obviously going to die off right here. We're going to drop it out. Goes away. Just a little layering. You can see there's not everything is always playing at the same time, and that's important because you don't want to overwhelm the scene. A lot of film composers make this big mistake of when they get a film, they think, oh, this is gonna be my artistic masterpiece. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. It's gonna be the greatest film score of all time. That's not your job as a film composer, or TV composer, or video game composer. Your job is to always respect the scene and respect the stuff that's happening in the scene. You have to remember that there's the picture, there's the effects that are on the picture, there's the sound design that's in there, there's the music, there's the dialogue. So there's a lot of things that can overwhelm people's senses. So if you, as a musician or composer, or songwriter, what have you, your job is not to take over someone else's life work. Your job is to support that. That's why musicians and composers, they usually get the film or the TV show at the end when it's already created. So I always look at it as, you're not going to harsh someone else's dream. You're just there to help it. So that's layer 3. Okay, let's listen to layer 4, which is very simple. See the automation on this too. It's a little pulse. Just adds a little bit. Fades out there because it can fade out there. It's not the end of the track. Okay, so now we're going to let's listen to the next layer, just here, which actually, the way I created this cue, this entire track, I can isolate this, and this is its own cue itself. And it's been licensed a lot just by itself. That's all it does. I'll have a look at the automation on that. It's very straightforward. It's going to stop right here, obviously. So individually, there's not a lot musically going on in all these tracks. So that's that track, which is going to it'll fade out there. And then, of course, our button ending, or sting ending, button ending, ring out ending. It's just basically a hit. It's going to. Now we can go to commercial, or now we can go to a different scene. So we listen to each one of these tracks individually. They don't sound like much, but when you put them together, they're very powerful. There's little bits in each one of them that make up the entire cue. See how they all blend? There's no real tonal center here either. It's our little drone right here. So our hit point could be, there's a hit point right there. They can just end that cue right there if you're a music editor. You can just stop. Or there. Or here. Silence is a hit point too. You have to remember that if you write your music in a certain way that makes it easier for editors and supervisors to be able to put it in their shows, that's the whole goal. And it could be a singer-songwriter, it could be bands, it doesn't matter. You have to have that mindset, and we're going to talk more about that as we go through. Again, we have this raises up a little bit in volume here, this track. None of these are playing, obviously. So there you go. It's 2-minute cue, 149, I guess. Let's have a look at some of the VSTs or stuff I used here, because it's been a while. Some stuff in it. So I used Aeon stuff for that track. Again, there's just a different patch. This is just since it built in Logic. Again, this only took like an hour or 2 hours to write. Now the key is, you can think of this a couple of ways. I think about it, different way. But so that whole cue is a cue. So that's registered with your PRO, all that stuff together. But I also made this one a cue in itself, that we talked about earlier, because maybe somebody just wants a droney, pulsy kind of thing. Right? So that's a cue. So that one cue now became two. Now I can also do some things where I go like this. So let's add these two layers. Go back here. It's Q3 right there. So I just have 3 cues. Maybe I'll take just these two. And that's a cue. So I've got what, 3, 4 cues. Maybe I'll add that. That's another cue. All these are registered with your PRO. Your sting ending, you're going to want to move. You can move that around. You can do all kinds of stuff. So that's how you can actually get more than one cue or track out of a track. So say we got 4 or 5 different versions of this track. Say we took layers out, or we, moved them around. The other thing you do is you take each one of these tracks, which are individual stems. That's what they're called, stems, parts of a track that make up a track, parts of a cue or a track, whichever way you want to say it. So all these individual things are also registrable with your PRO. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We just talked about 4 different versions or 5 different versions of the cues. All of a sudden you got 11 or 12 different versions of a cue, or you've got registered stuff with your PRO. Because maybe the music editor only likes this track combined with this. So let's have a listen to that. So just these two. Doesn't sound crazy musically, but kind of neat. There's a track right there for you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't want to look at your composition or your song as one thing. This gets registered with SOCAN. This does. This does. This does. This does. This does. Now, cool thing about this is that, say, let's listen to this track, which is obviously it's a hit point or a stage. That can be licensed all by itself. So each one of these things can be licensed as a full composition, or maybe just that, or maybe that and that, or this and that. So you take your cue and you try to make as much money musically from it. So it's not just, hey, this is my song, yeah, it's great, it's in all these shows. You take each individual part and you register it itself as a stem. So maybe I would call this Infidel, and we'll get into this. This is called metadata, which we'll talk about in the coming weeks. Infidel pulse drone stem, Infidel glass stem, Infidel pulsing stem. And we'll talk more about this. We don't get too bogged down in this right now. So that's basically the anatomy of a TV cue, a successful one too. This one's been in a ton of shows. So we got 6 different tracks, not all going at the same time. It's called layering. Not too busy all the time. We're pulling stuff in, we're pulling stuff out. We're adding stuff, we're pulling back. So you're giving people, when the hit points are there, those hard hits, you're giving music editors and supervisors a chance to cut that cue at 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it is. Remember the button ending? No fade outs, okay? No fade outs. Remember all your stems are registerable with PRO. It could be BMI, ASCAP, SOCAN, whoever it may be. I hope everybody actually got their IPICA number in the works if you haven't got one already. So you take that one cue and it becomes probably 13 cues or 12 cues altogether that you can register. When you submit your music to music libraries and music supervisors, which we'll also be talking about coming up soon, you're giving them an opportunity to make their job easier. And that's the whole goal of music licensing. If you give someone a full song with vocals and all that kind of thing, they can only use it so many ways. But if you give them small versions, and again, we'll get into this, but if you give them opportunities to be able to cut your music in a certain place, it makes their job easier. I hope everybody understood that. If not, send me a note and we'll talk about it, or we can talk about it again in other lessons. But as you can see, this is not Beethoven's Fifth here. This is a very straightforward underscore cue. And you have to remember the underscore in the TV world, which could be an instrumental version of your pop song that you wrote, or a singer-songwriter instrumental version, you know, its underscore is not there to take over. It's there to support. And as you can see here in these layers, that's exactly what this cue does, and that's probably why it's so successful with music supervisors and music editors and that sort of thing. That's why it's been used so much. Okay, so you saw my overview of that cue. Read the definitions that are in the lesson plan, lesson overview. I hope you understood the concepts of the hit points, of the button endings, of the layering. As you can tell, there's not a lot to that track, but it's made a lot of money over the last 6 years, I guess, and it's still going. It's been in TV shows even just the last couple of days. So think about the various aspects of a cue. Simplicity is king, right? That's the thing you have to remember. You don't have to go in there, and I joke on that video, you know, it's not Beethoven's Fifth, but not Beethoven's Fifth for sure. But it's something that works in certain types of shows, you know, Shark Week shows and Discovery shows. Discovery ID uses a lot. So just have a look at those definitions, familiarize yourself with them. Kind of use those as a rule when you are writing. Also, think about changing your mindset before you even walk into your studio, or if you've got a tabletop studio, or you go to someone else's studio. Before you go in there, think about things like how many cues or how many different versions of this song can I do, and we're going to talk a lot more about that with the songwriting side of things, which is really, really neat aspect of licensing music. But think about not just going in there to do one thing, like I'm going to write this great song, or I'm going to write this great tune, or great track, or great instrumental. Think about, before you even start the process, I can write this in a certain way where I might be able to get 10, 12 tracks or different cues out of it by layering, taking things out, putting things in, things like that. I mean, that's kind of the way I learned the hard way about that. I used to go in and just write music, and I loved doing it, but I didn't cut a lot of it up in different ways, and that I do with this track, for example. But then one day I realized, if I change my mindset about that, all of a sudden I make more music from one track or one tune. So people who have a back catalog, I think this is really important. You could have recorded it yourself, or you probably went into a studio with a producer or an engineer or someone else's personal studio. I think it's really imperative that you get in touch with those people and see if you can get the actual stems and parts of your music that you recorded. Maybe it was a single, maybe it was a whole album. Because if you can get that information back to you, or you can go and talk to them about it, you should look at doing different versions of your music. Instrumental versions, if you're a singer-songwriter, and we're going to talk way more about that next week. But you want to have the ability, before you even go to a studio, if you're going in there, to tell the producer or engineer, listen, I'm going to want all these different versions of this track. If you've got a back catalog, see if you can go back to those people. Hopefully they won't charge you too much money. This is why you want to think about it before you go into a studio. Have it as part of your deal, and we're going to talk lots about that. But see if you can go back and get the stems or get the music, and or if they'll do it for you, you know, do the different versions and that sort of thing. Because really the way you make money in the music business is having lots of music out there. Just tons of music out there. So the old way of doing it, you know, Led Zeppelin puts out an album, Houses of the Holy, it's got so many songs on it. That's great. But today, you can go in and do a 10-song album and come out with 50, 60, 70 different versions of that tune or all those tunes. And that each one of those is registered PRO, and it's a lot easier to license actually. So check that out. Next week we'll get into some new things about packaging and business. And yeah, I hope you have a great week. Thanks for watching. And send me any feedback if you want anytime at all. Just go through our website and I'll be here.